Well, welcome. Hello, everybody. Good morning if you're in North America. My name is Jamie Textor. I am the Director of Customer Success for North America. And it's so fun to be a part of this global brand. I know it's global because I see this amazing list of participants, and it's clear that although this is the second of our North American time zone type of webinars, we have participants from all over the world who are interested in using Slape or are already Slape users. So welcome to all of you. I'll just spend a couple of minutes waiting for a few more people to join us, and we'll get right into our topic today. We've teed up for you this really bite-sized coffee break, maybe, version of a CE course for you, and targeting a very specific topic that is, of course, as with all things objective gait analysis, very complicated. Nonetheless, today, what we're going to do is talk about what we can access in that realm as clinicians in a practical way, I hope, out in the field. And I'm going to share with you a few case examples that illustrated this topic very well for me. Okay, let's get into it. Before we do, please use the Q&A. I'm alone with you today. I don't have a moderator or another host helping us to field questions. So what we'll do is spend about 25 minutes together talking through and going over the slides. This will, of course, be available as a recorded webinar later, so you can share it with your friends or go back and take a look later if you have to head out midstream and you get called away. And just be aware that at the last 5 minutes, I'll go through the Q&A pane and answer as many as I possibly can. And if I can't get to them live today, we'll circle back with you and follow up by email if possible. Okay, so let's get into it. Our topic today is unraveling compensatory lameness, how Slape can help. Let me share my screen. All right, and here we go. Excellent. And by the way, I'm going to share with you at the very last slide, I've got about 5 references that are great that you can check out and do as your own lit search if you would like to follow up and do some more reading on this topic. So here we go. By the way, folks, we have some folks on the call who probably are not yet Slape users, so I will be reviewing some basics about how to interpret Slape results. We won't spend too much time on that, but we do need to go through it so that everybody in the audience can be present and understand fully what we're talking about. All right, so what do we mean when we say compensatory lameness? Frankly, this isn't a term that we use in the States. We would say referred lameness is our more common term. But when we talk about compensatory lameness, we're talking about something that is kind of an optical illusion, or it isn't necessarily a real pain-related movement pattern. It's related and derived from compensation due to lameness in a different limb. So that creates the appearance of lameness in another limb just by virtue of the way the horse is trying to compensate with its quadrupedal motion, and that can appear as an asymmetry in a different limb. So the key question when we find that, and by the way, super common, right? To see a combined forelimb and hind limb asymmetry pattern in no matter which objective gait analysis system you're using, or even with our eye, we can pick it up a lot of the time. The question is when we see that, and if you look at a large case study, a large retrospective study over 1,000 cases of clinical lameness that was done at University of Missouri by Drs. Reed, Dr. Keegan's group, et cetera, 57% of those lameness cases out of over 1,000 naturally occurring lameness had a combined pattern of forelimb and hind limb asymmetry. So it's super common. Well, what about, is it possible that we have multi-limb lameness, or do we have true multi-limb lameness in that case, or do we have referred lameness? Is one coming from another? And trying to tease that apart can be very challenging. Usually it requires that we do some blocking in order to prove things, but it also takes something like objective gait analysis. So we're not going crazy. We can take our bias and our sort of uncertainty out of the equation. It gets a little bit murky sometimes when we start to do some blocking, and Slape can help in that regard. So we know that recognized compensatory patterns do exist. Now, they are patterns. They are not laws. They are not 100% of the time. Horses do what they want, as we know. But there are some recognized compensatory patterns, which is great because that means that Slape, when they arise, Slape will try to flag them for you and give you a little heads up, a little red flag. Hey, this might be a compensatory situation. Keep it in mind, okay, which I find helpful. All right. So, as I said, in order to peel back the layers, we talk about, lameness and the way horses move sometimes like the layers of an onion, right? And in order to peel back those layers, often we try to pick one limb to start with, the one we think is the primary lameness. We start blocking, and then we see what the effect of that block is, not only on that limb, but on asymmetries that may be detected in other limbs as well. So what are those common compensatory patterns that we're talking about? Well, here we have a primary forelimb lameness pattern depicted on the left. This is exactly the image that you'll see come up on your SLAPE screen in your results section in an instance where you have an ipsilateral fore and hind limb asymmetry detected. The suggestion, or a contralateral, in fact, for a primary forelimb, excuse me. So a primary forelimb can lead to either ipsilateral impact in the hind limb, that is to say, during the impact phase of the stride, a pelvic asymmetry may be detected, or a contralateral push-off is a common situation. And the flip side of that is when we're talking about a primary hind limb lameness, it can lead to an ipsilateral impact lameness, okay, or asymmetry, I should say more strictly. And this one I think about as, at the trot. We're working at the trot, of course, when we use objective gait analysis. And I feel like when a horse is trying to unweight its hind end onto the shared forelimb of the shared diagonal, the head is more likely to be going down, right, over here on the right front as she unweights the left hind, for example. And that can create the appearance of a left front and ipsilateral forelimb asymmetry. Okay, so here you go. These are the patterns. Primary forelimb could lead to either ipsilateral hind limb impact asymmetry or contralateral push-off asymmetry in the hind end. And for the hind being primary, it could cause an ipsilateral forelimb lameness. This one is quite common. All right, so let's get into it. We're going to start right away with some cases. Here we go. This horse, I'm just going to show you the left circle only, but please know that we did all conditions, the straight and both circles, as I almost always do. If I can do it, I do it. And in the interest of time, we're just going to show you the one video today, and then we will get into how to interpret these results real quick, and we'll watch the video again briefly before we talk about the blocking results. So hang tight, and let's take a look at this video. I hope your quality at home is as good as it is here on my screen, but as you know, with meetings and so forth, sometimes it doesn't always translate. So this horse was off in the right front, as you can see there. We didn't need sleep to tell us that, pretty obvious, and was also off in the left hind. And this was true not only in this condition, going to the left, but was also true consistently in all conditions, going on the straight in both circles. This is the one that was worse, so that's the one that I'm showing you. I'm going to let the video play. You can see a couple of really sore steps there in the right front. And those steps led me to believe that that right front at least is real, right? Because that's not compensatory right there. That was something about the right front hitting the ground. So I decided to start blocking there. We'll get to that in a moment. I'll be quiet and just let you watch for a sec here. All right, let me pause that for a sec. We'll come over to the SLAPE results. Keep in mind, guys, SLAPE is an asymmetry detector. It is looking for the vertical displacement of the head, the body here at the trunk. We don't have this information on this horse because trunk is relatively new, that's SLAPE offering, but head, trunk, and pelvis, okay, at the tuber sacrale, so right on midline. We're looking at where are those body parts in space vertically only on the left versus the right. Are they different given a certain pair of strides? Do they differ that amount of cyclical movement up and down, okay? Asymmetry detector in the vertical plane. Okay, so if we come over here and we look at these results, they can be summarized as follows. This little table can be divided to 2 and 2 here, a 2x2 table. We have 2 lines per leg, remember, because we're reporting the push-off phase when the horse is just breaking over, just launching up the highest position of the head, trunk, or pelvis. And then we're also reporting the impact phase. That's the second line for each leg, and that is highly correlated with mid-stance of a given limb. So this upper left quadrant, these 2 lines is the left forelimb. These 2 lines, right fore. These 2 lines down in the lower left quadrant, left hind, and lower right quadrant, right hind. Okay, and the line down the middle would be the line of symmetry, right? The line of 0. So if we had a robot horse out there trotting around on the circle, we would have no colored bars coming off because there would be no asymmetry to report. We'd have a perfectly symmetric machine out there trotting. But in this guy's case, we do have asymmetry to report, and this is it. Yellow, a mild amount of, in this case, didn't look too mild to me, but a mild amount of asymmetry in this instance, both during the push-off phase and the impact phase on the right front. And then in the left hind, we have this orange moderate amount of pelvic limb asymmetry in the push-off phase, and then a mild amount noted in the impact phase. And the vectors that display those are here for you, okay? Every line that you see represents one pair of strides, left versus right, if there was an asymmetry detected, okay? So for each of these, you can see there are a lot of lines here as opposed to dots plotted at zero. If we had a symmetric pair of strides with the same head movement or pelvic movement front to left to right, we would just put a bunch of dots at zero. But instead, for this horse, we have nothing but lines. And in the front end, for the head, they're all pointing to the right, almost all of them, excuse me. There's a few here to the left. Even this horse mixes it up a little bit. And in the pelvis, they're all pointing to the left, okay? All right, let's go back and just briefly look at Titchmore, and then we're going to show you what the blocking results look like. I don't have the post-blocking video, but let's check this out. Okay, so here we go. We can see that head movement on the indicating right front lameness, and we can see that that left hip is just falling off more. That should be here on the inside of the circle. We expected a little bit on the inside of the circle, but not this much. All right, let's see what our blocking results look like and where we started here. All right, let's pause that. Great. So we just started with a PD block, as you do, and blocked the foot, or the lower part of the foot, I should say, in this horse on the right front. And what happened? Well, you can see that those yellow bars on the right front are gone. And instead, now we're starting to begin to see some left front. By the way, this is the same condition, a circle to the left, that these results are from. So I'm comparing apples to apples here. Super important to do that, right? And interestingly, also check out how this left hind asymmetry has changed quite a bit. Now, it's not gone, but it's been eliminated pretty dramatically there. And as you come down to the vector plots, it's not gone, right? We can still see we have plenty of vectors going to the left, but at least a large portion of this horse's asymmetry in the left hind was being referred, was compensatory from this significant right front asymmetry. Okay, here's a second case. Let me pause for a moment, let you catch your breath. And in this horse, again, same thing. I only have the straight line for this one to show you, but let's take a look at the baseline video. And then we do have a post-blocking video for this animal. And let's check this out. You'll notice, if you're savvy, that this video is not true baseline. This was after a low 4-point had already been applied in this limb, and it didn't change anything. So we're still showing you that video. So let's consider this baseline. And you should be able to see a fairly obvious right hind lameness there. And interestingly, when he turns and comes back towards us, we're going to take a look at what he's doing with his head. I'm actually going to move a little forward because the handler steps in front of him. Let's do the second pass here. But I would say, to my eye, it's not super obvious, the right front, but he is kind of moving his nose forward, you know? So that's what we're seeing on that front, when there is something going on with the right front there as well in terms of his asymmetric pattern. Let's see what he looked like after they moved up from the low 4 and did that sort of high suspensory block. The deep branch of the lateral plantar nerve was blocked. And right away, it should be pretty obvious to your eye that this horse is traveling much more evenly. We don't have that very obvious drop off of the right side of the pelvis. And now his head looks particularly steady, at least to my eye. We're going to take a look at the results here in just a moment and see what happened. All right, let's do one more pass. Actually, I think that's probably adequate. Let's move on. I think you guys can all appreciate that that looks a lot different, right? So what did the results look like? Let's go on. Here we go. Okay, so on the baseline video, this is the asymmetry results that were obtained. And there was a significant amount of head movement, actually more than I could certainly detect with my eye. And that was noted in both phases of the stride, once again, so that push off the top line as well as the impact phase of the stride. And then, of course, the right hind was noted to be the more obvious and is likely to be the primary limb in this case. And sure enough, that's where they were blocking, as you know. And take a look, guys, too, at the fact that all of these vectors now in this particular horse, and we didn't have a ton of strides down here, but we got the number we needed. but they're all super tightly bunched together. Can you see that? So this horse is traveling in a highly consistent manner. This is a really nice way to help inspect your data and go beyond the mean, as I like to say, to get a little bit more granular about your data and find out on a stride-by-stride basis whether the mean that's displayed here is truly representative of your data set. And in this case, we can say it is, okay, in both the forelimbs and the hind limbs. So what happened after the block when he looked so much better? Wow. This is a pretty dramatic change. Obviously, it's an example case for a reason. But as you can see, all of this right hind asymmetry has been eliminated insofar as sleep detection is responsible, which is unusual. Usually we can still, sleep still picks up a bit of alteration in the amount of pelvic movement or head movement there, but it's all gone in this case. And in fact, all of that right front as well, all of it is gone. So that right front head movement that was asymmetric here has been entirely eliminated only by blocking the right hind. Okay, so that was a 100% pure compensatory right front asymmetry, all right, in this particular instance. Okay, we've got one more for you. We've got about 17 minutes, so I've got about 8 minutes here to go, and then we'll open it up for some questions. So here's another nice quarter horsey case for you from coming to you from California, as I do. So again, this is a horse that, in this case, I could see this right front asymmetry on the straight and the right circle. I don't think we saw much on the left circle for this horse, but it was quite obvious on the straight line. I'm going to show you the right circle only. And we were seeing this right front asymmetry, and a left hind impact asymmetry was also reported. We could see the left hind as well. Let's take a look at the video, and I'm going to skip forward here. Now, of course, by virtue of traveling on a circle, guys, we do often see some asymmetries, right? That's how we move on circles, is by making ourselves asymmetric. But this amount of inside forelimb asymmetry is excessive, is not normal. And you can see that my video is not perfect, just like perhaps some of yours. So I was not standing back far enough from the horse. And so the horse traveled outside the frame on a couple of strides. It's okay. You don't have to stop your video. Sleep is waiting for the horse to come back into the frame, and then it's capturing those trot strides when she does. Interestingly, nice stride length here in this right front. Sometimes she's really stretching it out, but nonetheless has some asymmetry there. So, and you can see her kind of leaving that left hind behind. Okay, great. Let's pause that. We have quite a few results to go through on this horse, so let's get into it. So that video, what you're seeing here, is reflected in these results. So this is the results for the right circle only that I'm showing you, okay? And so this is the amount of asymmetry. Remember, orange is coded as a moderate degree of asymmetry, and it was present in both the impact and the push-off phases of the stride in this horse's case. And then this left hind was being detected, albeit at somewhat of a lower level as an impact asymmetry, okay? And that was also present when we did her straight line sleep, okay? And so this is what the means looked like, and here they are, of course, in the colored vectors, just reviewing for anybody that's new to sleep. And then here's what all of the individual stride by stride, pairs of strides looked like, the magnitude of these asymmetries in terms of her head movement. How different was it? And the longer the line, of course, the greater the magnitude of the asymmetry. So quite a bit of, as we might say, head nod visible in this horse's case. And then mixing it up a little bit in magnitude in the hind end, but quite a few significant strides on the impact there, pointing to the left hind. Okay, so let's go on to what happened after we did some blocking. And please bear with me. Let's look at one thing at a time here, because this is a bit much to digest all at once. Please start here looking at what we just discussed a little bit. This is the very first block that we did. Pardon me, it is not the first block we did. This is prior to blocking. And I must have done a separate one here, but no, I guess this is the same one, just smaller. Okay, so this is what we just looked at, the baseline. This is our circle to the right, and we're comparing now after we started again with a right front PD in this case and blocked the horse's foot, and we reduced that right front asymmetry quite a bit, effectively eliminated it functionally, okay? However, we still have quite a few vectors, admittedly, going over in this direction, so is it totally gone? Maybe not, but we made a big difference there. Interestingly, though, on this horse's case, I could still see it pretty prominently. In fact, I think she got worse on the straight line, which happens sometimes when you block the foot and it's not all there or not there in the first place. And in the left hind, didn't have a lot of change here. We still have quite a bit of long vectors going that looks like something is happening in the hind end. Don't know yet if it's real or compensatory, right? So I kept blocking. I went up and I did now an abaxial block as well. So we've got the entire pastern and foot blocked. Maybe we're even getting into a bit of fetlock being blocked out here. And, same thing. We didn't make a lot of further headway here on this right circle. The right front was already kind of a done deal. I was curious to see what, if anything, was going to change in the left hind. And also, as I mentioned, I was kind of chasing this right front on the straight line, which I'm not showing you here. But so here the vectors are looking even better, I would say, more distributed left and right. She's mixing it up. On average, these are all canceling each other out, even though they are still a little bit long in both directions to be effectively symmetric in the front end. And in the hind end, we're shifting it a little bit. The dials are turning, right? The vector direction is changing a little bit and showing us a bit more here now on the right as well, but it's still there, okay? So I am changing the left hind by virtue of changing the right front, but I haven't eliminated it entirely, and I kept going. I went up and now blocked again at the proximal suspensory and did a high 4-point in this particular horse's case. And now, interestingly, what has happened is that little tiny residual right front that was still there has been switched over to the left. So now, even though this doesn't look entirely different, you can see that there are more now vectors to the left here than there were over on this side, such that the mean value is now reflected as showing, if anything, some left front asymmetry on this condition, the circle to the right. And again, now we've got a reduction for sure in this left hind asymmetry. Okay, did we get elimination? No, we did not. But there was a large portion of this horse's hind limb asymmetry that was clearly compensatory from the right front lameness. Okay, and interestingly, here's an example of a case sometimes we have not just multi-limb, but one limb multi-problem, right? So here's a horse that did localize for sure. She had a problem in her foot. She had some amount of pain coming from her foot. She also clearly had some kind of some amount of tendinous or ligamentous pain, and I think we found some suspensory changes on her when we scanned her. So my take home on this one was, yes, things did get better with blocking the right front, but the left hind impact still did persist on some level. And in retrospect, or in hindsight, if we're talking about the hind limbs, maybe I should have also blocked the left hind on this one. The complaint and the primary concern for the horse's functionality was the right front, and we felt that we were making enough of a difference. But looking back at these results with some strictness and a bit more critical eye, there's probably something real, quote unquote, there, perhaps a pain-causing primary lameness in the left hind as well, just not as bad as the right front. So what's the take home on compensatory lameness in general? Well, it's super common. Like I said, 57% of that very large case series, 1,200 cases of horses with lameness from University of Missouri, 57% of them had a combined pattern. And I think the more you use SLAPE, if you're like me, the more you will notice that, oh yeah, now I can also see it more than I used to. And the fact is, it's been there all along. Sometimes we've been able to pick it up with our eye. For me, many times I wasn't. Certainly now I am seeing it a lot more. I'm seeing it more because I have learned it by looking at SLAPE, seeing it detected, going back and watching the slow-mo video, going, oh yeah, I can see that. Okay, interesting. Do we have a multi-limb or do we have compensatory situations going on, right? But keep in mind, as I said, these are patterns. This is not 100%. Sometimes horses are doing things that could be that it's, a referred contralateral from a hind limb or something like that. But these are the ones that are most common, and that's based on a pretty large body of research nowadays. And here's the research, by the way. So if you want to snap a quick picture of this screen, you might be able to go back and take a look at these references later. The one that I have been talking about is this one down here at the bottom. And this one was based on a study using the equinosis system, the lameness locator system. Nonetheless, those parameters are the same things that SLAPE is looking at. These are the tried and true metrics that we use in objective gait analysis in horses in the field. And that is to say the vertical displacement of the head, body, or pelvis. So check out all of these nice papers if you have a moment and you'd like to do more. All right, let me stop sharing here and let's come back to you and we will look at some questions, see what you guys have. Only one so far, so better be a good one. Let's see. Okay, what's your interpretation when you keep seeing small improvements as you work your block proximally? Are all the areas involved, or would you do imaging of each area or keep working way up until you see the most improvement? And that is a great question, right? When we're doing blocking and we're seeing incremental change, these can be kind of maddening, right? And sometimes we feel like we're seeing that with our eye, and then we're wondering if we're crazy. We worry about our bias, et cetera, but we can still see that objectively sometimes as well using SLAPE or other systems and what to do in that case. Well, I think certainly the way nerve transmission probably works in the limb, the higher up you go on a nerve trunk, it's possible that you are still improving your distal local anesthesia or pain relief in some cases as you add more, and so incrementally going further up, you might still be treating or numbing the same area, if that makes sense. But the bottom line is, I think if you're starting to see incremental change, it can be tough for all of us, right? And so you're hopefully going to use your clinical judgment, your clinical findings from your physical examination and all the other things you're picking up in 3D. And keep in mind, and I started to narrate out loud for myself all of the things that I was noticing and observing, because it's not going to be just the vertical displacement of the head, body, and pelvis, right? How about your stride length from the stride? How about the flight of the limb? How about the horse's facial expression? How about the speed that they take off with? Are they swishing the tail anymore? Can they now do that transition that they couldn't do before, right? So I would remind you to not be wedded strictly to your SLAPE results. I would remind you to continue your very comprehensive clinical exam and look at as many conditions as possible. Try to identify at your baseline the one where you're seeing it the most, like the thing that you really want to change the most, right? And then when I see that change, then that is where I'm going to start imaging, okay, rightly or wrongly, or at least I know I'm getting warmer. Okay, but it's always tough. Good question. Thanks. Excellent. Next one is um, let's see here. I've got if a horse is lame from right hind and shows compensatory lameness in the right front, but the scapula is a bit more prominent and more bulged than the left one, how would you deal with that type of case? Well, that's a great question, but SLAPE or other systems like that are not looking at the scapula. So they're looking at the highest position of the head. And so you're not going to have any kind of parameter like that is not going to be affected in creating a visual or a data collection problem. Okay. If there is truly a problem with the scapula, that's a different matter, of course, right? But that should not be an issue. Okay. Have you seen a certain structure being more related to a compensatory pattern? In other words, hoof, hock, proximal suspensory limb. I haven't, but I think some people would anecdotally tell you that they feel like they start to see patterns of localization, where if I have a proximal suspensory, that was, one of the cases, or if not two, that we talked about today, that we could see some compensation going on. I think the bottom line is the worse the asymmetry, the more likely you are to see a compensatory pattern, right? And so keep that in mind, all right? On a more subtle asymmetry level, you're probably less likely to see that there's something referred, okay? Is this going to be recorded for viewing on the website? Yes, it is. Thank you very much for asking. How do you interpret when push-off and impact vectors are in conflict? Wow, great question. And the answer is we don't have that totally sussed out yet, but the answer is different in the fore versus the hind. So let me just briefly try to address that. Number one, first of all, for me, if I see it in both the push-off and the impact on the same limb, for me, that's always the most robust result, right? That's what I'm hoping for eventually, right? To sort of feel confident about identifying the correct limb. In the forelimbs, however, in the head, the push-off phase of the stride is somewhat variable. In other words, what the horse does with his head when he is pushing off is different individual to individual. Some of them can in fact throw their head up to help them get off a limb that hurts, right? And that would be reflected as the wrong limb being flagged. In the hind limbs, though, and in the trunk, they can't sort of accentuate that with this long lever arm of the head. So the trunk and the hind limbs don't really lie. The push off tells you that that is real on that location. All right, that is an asymmetry that is not being modified by an expression like calling out to your friend, your horse, or by a decision to use your head and your weight. If they're in conflict, push off and impact, then I consider both, but I am always, in my world, more impressed by an impact phase asymmetry. So I hope that helps. The answer is there's not a black and white total answer there. Okay. And here's a question. Are you not using the trunk feature on the app to differentiate between primary, secondary lameness, front versus hind? The answer is absolutely I am. But these cases that I shared with you were before we offered the trunk feature. So the great news is, and thank you for this segue, we actually have a third webinar coming up, and it is April 29th, and it's going to be on how to use the trunk data to help us to peel back these layers of is it compensatory or is it multi-limb lameness? So thanks so much for asking. Okay, guys, we're out of time. I'm sorry, we've got a lot of other great questions that have come in, but I will circle back and we will follow up with you and give you answers, hopefully by the email address that you've entered at your registration. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day wherever you are in the world and keep sleeping.